Her hand closed around the brass key she was not supposed to have, and she turned it before she could lose her nerve. The lock gave with a soft, offended click. Eleanor Vance held her breath. 3 floors below, in the great hall where she should have been polishing the silver, the long case clock struck 8. She had exactly 42 minutes before the housekeeper came looking. She had rehearsed the walk, counted the stairs, memorized the turn at the portrait gallery. She had not, until this moment, allowed herself to imagine what was on the other side of this door. The door breathed outward on its hinges, releasing air that smelled of cold stone and something faintly medicinal, and Eleanor stepped into a room that every maid at Ashdown Hall had been warned, on pain of dismissal, never to enter. It was not what she had expected. She had expected something terrible, a family coffin, a trophy wall of old cruelties. The bones, perhaps, that village gossips swore were there. What she found instead was a long library room with 2 tall windows where the spring morning came in slantwise, gold and kind, across a carpet worn almost to its weave. A desk strewn with letters, 3 oil lamps, each burned to a different level, a fire built but unlit in the grate, a wall of ledgers bound in green morocco, and at the far end, set into its own alcove, a single wooden cabinet with 3 brass locks. 3 locks, not 1. Eleanor took 1 step forward, then another, and as the floor creaked under her borrowed slippers, she understood, with a cold clarity she had been refusing for weeks, that she was no longer playing at being a maid. She had come for this cabinet. Everything else, the forged reference letter, the false name, the dyed dress, the studied clumsiness she had practiced with the old cook at the coaching inn, had been to bring her here, to this moment, in front of these 3 locks. "If you are going to steal from me, Miss Vance," said a voice from the doorway, "you should have done it on your 2nd day, not your 1st. The household is harder to blame when they have had time to know you." Eleanor did not turn. She did not, she told herself, permit her body to betray the sudden bright panic under her ribs. She simply lowered her hand from the cabinet and folded it, with the other, at the small of her back. She had spent 9 years learning how to stand still under attack. She did not intend to squander that training now. "Your Grace," she said, "I was unaware this room was private." "Were you?" It was not a question. It was the mildest possible correction, delivered by a man who did not raise his voice, because he had never in his life needed to. She turned at last. The Duke of Ashdown was 27 years old and did not look it. He looked like a man who had spent a great deal of time very still, in rooms like this, watching the spring come and go without him. He was tall, taller than she had braced for, and lean in a way that suggested habitual exercise rather than austerity. His hair was the pale gold of wheat at the end of August, cropped shorter than fashion required, and a single strand had fallen across his forehead from walking fast up the stairs. His eyes were grey with a warmer undertow, somewhere between storm and slate, and they were fixed on her with the polite, implacable attention of a man deciding what to do with a piece of evidence. He was not angry. That was the first thing she noted, and the last thing she had expected. He was merely paying attention. "The key," he said. Eleanor opened her palm. The brass key sat on it like something borrowed from a dollhouse. He crossed the carpet without hurry. He did not take the key. He looked at it, then at her, and something moved behind his face that was not quite amusement, and not quite pity. "Mrs. Halliwell's spare," he said. "You pulled it from the pantry hook this morning, I suppose, while she was arguing with the fishmonger." "I did not argue with the fishmonger, Your Grace." "No," said the Duke. "She did. That was the point." He studied her a moment longer. Eleanor had braced, against everything her governess had taught her, for the bellow. She had braced for the hand on her elbow, the march down the servants' stairs, the constable at noon. What she had not braced for was the Duke's faint, dry sigh, as if he had simply confirmed something tedious and inevitable about the universe. "You are not a maid," he said. "No, Your Grace." Your hands do not match your story. Your consonants do not match your accent. Your grip on that key is that of a person who has been taught to handle papers, not silverware. Yes, Your Grace. And you have come here, through a great deal of trouble, to open a cabinet that has 3 locks, of which you have only 1 key. Eleanor said nothing. The Duke glanced briefly at the cabinet behind her. Then he did something that surprised her so thoroughly, she felt her composure twitch. He sat down. He took the chair nearest the unlit fire, folded his long frame into it, and gestured, a small, courteous gesture, to the chair opposite. "Sit down, Miss Vance," he said, "or whatever your name is. You have clearly prepared the conversation. Let us at least have it in armchairs." Eleanor began. "I am offering you 2 alternatives," he said, and for the first time, his voice warmed a fraction, into something like dry amusement. 1. I call Halliwell, and you are on the mail coach by supper with no reference. 2. You sit down, you tell me who you are, and we discover together whether I should have given you the other 2 keys with the first. She sat down. The Duke watched her compose herself into the chair, the way another man might watch a swallow land on a garden rail. With interest, with patience, with the faint, measuring smile of someone who had been curious about her longer than she realized. "My name," Eleanor said, "is Eleanor Hart. My father was Captain Thomas Hart of the 14th Light Dragoons. He was lost in a debtor's prison 7 years ago, accused of stealing from the regimental chest. He did not steal from it. I'm going to prove that, and I believe the proof is in that cabinet, because your uncle, Sir Roland, sold my father to the court-martial in order to save himself." The Duke did not flinch. He did not widen his eyes. He did not, to her infinite irritation, look surprised at any part of it. "Yes," he said. "That is about what I thought." "What?" "Miss Hart," said the Duke of Ashdown, "I have been expecting you for approximately 4 months." Eleanor felt the room tilt very slightly. She held very still until it righted. "How?" she said. "My steward keeps a list of every person who has written to the War Office asking for the Hart court-martial transcripts. Your solicitor's name is on it. My uncle's name is on it. Your name is on it. The fact that you wrote under 3 different initials and 4 different addresses suggested you were serious, and also that you were running out of money. When Mrs. Halliwell mentioned, 3 weeks ago, that she had received an unusually well-written letter of application from a young woman whose references were, in her words, a little too tidy, I encouraged her to hire you." Eleanor's hands closed on the arms of the chair. "You brought me here," she said. "I allowed you to come here. There is a difference, though I grant it is subtle." "Why?" The Duke was quiet for a long moment. The morning sun moved on the carpet. Somewhere in the house a door closed with the hollow, domestic sound of the maid going about her day, unaware that at this moment, in this room, a Duke was deciding how much of the truth to hand to a woman who had come to pick his lock. "Because my uncle Sir Roland is arriving at Ashdown for the Hawthorne Ball in 11 days, the Duke said, "and I have spent 5 years trying to prove what he did to your father. And I have found, forgive me, that I am no good at it. I do not have your pain. I have only the ledgers and the letters, and I can read them very well, but I cannot make a magistrate believe them. I need someone who lost something in this. I need someone who will look Sir Roland in the face at a ball where he thinks himself untouchable. And I need her to not flinch. I thought it would take you another month to reach us. You are ahead of schedule, Miss Hart. It is, frankly, a relief." Eleanor stared at him. "You are asking me," she said slowly, "to help you. I am asking you whether you came here to be a thief or a witness. Those are not the same thing. A thief takes the ledgers. A witness uses them. I would prefer, for both our sakes, a witness." "And if I refuse?" "Then," said the Duke, and his voice was gentle and awful at once. "You take your ledgers, and I wish you every possible fortune. But I should add, Miss Hart, that I do not believe you will refuse. You walked into a locked room on the morning of your first day. You did not wait. You did not test the field. You did not gather a second month's wages. People who wait do not do that. People who intend to raise a house do that. And I think you have been intending to raise my uncle for a very long time." Eleanor laughed. It was a short, startled, almost apologetic laugh. The first honest sound she had made in that house. "Your Grace," she said, "you are a great deal more dangerous than the village believes." "The village," said the Duke, "believes I'm a recluse with a morbid library." "Yes." "That is, broadly, correct." He rose from his chair and walked to the cabinet. He did not open it. He laid one long hand flat on its polished surface, very briefly, the way one might touch the shoulder of an ill friend. And then he turned back to her. "I will give you the second key today," he said. "The third I will give you when I am certain that we are, in fact, on the same side. That should take perhaps a week. In the meantime, Miss Hart, I should like to ask you a practical question." "Please." "Can you continue to be a maid for 11 days without killing Mrs. Halliwell?" Eleanor considered the question seriously. The housekeeper was a broad, red-cheeked woman, with the voice of a parade ground sergeant, and an unerring ability to find dust in rooms that had been cleaned 90 seconds earlier. "I can try, Your Grace." "Try very hard," said the Duke. "She is the most loyal person in this house, and she would die for me, and I am fond of her. Also, she has already written to my sister to say she suspects you are a gentlewoman, and wishes to know if it is one of my schemes. My sister, I should warn you, will arrive in 4 days to verify this personally." "Your sister?" "Lady Margaret. She is the most exhausting human being I have ever loved. You will adore her in precisely the way you adore a well-aimed cavalry charge." Eleanor stood. Her knees had stopped trembling somewhere in the last 10 minutes without her noticing. She smoothed the coarse grey apron that was no longer a disguise, and regarded the Duke. Tall, pale gold, mildly amused, infuriatingly prepared, with what she recognized, slightly to her horror, as the beginnings of professional respect. "Your Grace," she said. "Miss Hart." "I believe I should go polish some silver." "A wise use of your morning," said the Duke. He stepped aside. At the door he stopped her with a word. "Eleanor." It was the first time anyone in the house had used her real name, and it startled her more than the lock had. She turned. "Yes?" "If at any time in the next 11 days you come to believe that I am lying to you," said the Duke of Ashdown, "do not take another key. Come to me. I am a great many things, Miss Hart, but I have not survived this long by letting allies leave the house uncertain." She met his eyes. They held hers without flinching, without heat, without demand. Just the quiet, terrible steadiness of a man who had, in fact, been waiting for her for a very long time. "Yes, Your Grace," she said. And Eleanor Hart, 26 years old, dispossessed, disguised, and dangerously close to hope, for the first time in 7 years, walked out of the Duke's locked room into a corridor full of spring light. The corridor smelled of beeswax and old oak. Somewhere below, a pan scraped against a stove. The floorboards gave under her slippers with a soft, sighing creak she had not noticed on the way up. A shaft of morning light fell slant across the portrait of some long-departed Ashdown matriarch, and the brass of the picture rail glowed with it. Eleanor drew in one careful breath. Her lungs, she noticed with cold interest, were steadier than they had been in weeks. The cool banister under her palm, the distant rattle of crockery from the scullery, the faint, persistent scent of lavender from a linen press she had not yet been allowed to open. All of it steady. All of it real. The silver she polished that morning was very, very clean. Her cloth moved in slow, even circles. The candlesticks came up pewter bright under her hands. She set each one down with the careful, symmetrical placement of a woman who had, that morning, accidentally stopped running. The next 3 days moved with a strange, halved pace. Eleanor rose at 6, pinned her pale gold hair in the rough coronet the other maids wore, tied on the coarse grey apron that had been her disguise and was now, she supposed, her costume. She carried linens. She laid fires. She polished brass. She learned which of the other maids liked to sing under their breath in the scullery, and which of them fell silent when the housekeeper passed. She learned that the cook, a sturdy woman from Kent named Mrs. Pye, made a kind of soft currant bun on Wednesdays that the whole household ate standing up in the kitchen, with butter running down their wrists. And she learned that the Duke, who had not entered a kitchen in 9 years, entered it on the Wednesday of her first week, accepted a bun with both hands, ate it standing up with the scullery maids, thanked Mrs. Pye with the exact formality of a man thanking a war comrade, and left. The scullery maids afterwards could not stop talking. Eleanor, at the scullery sink, smiled into a pewter plate she was drying, and pretended she had not noticed. She saw him once more that week, in the corridor outside the morning room, and he bowed, a formal, minute Duke-to-Maid bow that would have fooled every person in the house except Mrs. Halliwell and Eleanor herself. She curtsied back. They did not speak. She carried on to the linen press. He carried on to the study. Behind his closed door she could hear, very faintly, the soft, persistent scratch of a pen on paper. Whatever he was writing a great deal of it. Lady Margaret Ashdown arrived 4 days later in a sprung carriage, a driving coat of saffron wool and a temper visible from the roof of the stable block. Eleanor had been drying a water glass in the pantry when the gravel announced her. She heard the boots on the flags and the housekeeper's voice pitched 2 octaves higher than usual and the Duke's murmuring reply. And she felt something she had not expected to feel in this house, which was curiosity. She put down the glass. She untied her apron. And because the Duke had told her not to hide, she walked calmly to the hall and stood in its doorway and watched Lady Margaret hand her gloves to a footman with the precision of a surgeon handing off a scalpel. Lady Margaret turned. She was 24, pale gold like her brother, and half a foot shorter, with a narrow mouth currently set in a line that promised weather. "You," said Lady Margaret, pointing a finger at Eleanor. "You are the maid." "I am." "You are not the maid." "I am both." Lady Margaret considered this. Then she laughed, once sharply, with genuine delight, and looked across the hall at her brother. "Simon," she said, "I am going to throttle you. Not in the foyer, Meg. You hired a gentlewoman and told no one. I did not hire her, she hired herself. I merely failed to dismiss her." "You are in so much trouble," said Lady Margaret, in the tone of someone who had just realized that the next 10 days were going to be considerably more interesting than she had planned. She swept across the flags toward Eleanor, took her hands, work-roughened, cold, into her own gloveless ones, and examined her the way a jeweler examines a stone someone has offered for pawn. "You have excellent bones," said Lady Margaret. "Very distressing. Come upstairs." "My lady, you should come upstairs. My brother, whom I love in a strictly managerial capacity, is about to tell me that you are here to assist him in ruining our uncle. I would prefer to hear this while you are in a chair. Simon, send tea. Do not put brandy in mine, but a great deal of brandy in hers." And Eleanor, who had come to Ashdown to commit a careful, solitary act of justice, and had somehow wandered into a conspiracy with a duke, his sister, and a teapot, followed Lady Margaret up the stairs. Behind them, in the doorway, Simon Ashdown watched the 2 women go. He was not smiling. He was, in fact, watching Eleanor Hart's straight back and pale gold head, with the focused, slightly stricken expression of a man who had, 11 days before a critical ball, just realized that he had miscalculated exactly one variable. His plan had required her to to be competent. It had not specified that he was going to like her. He made a private note to revisit that error at a more convenient hour, and went to find the brandy. The library that was not the locked library, the public one, the one guests were shown, with its oak panels and its decorative globe and its 10,000 books nobody had opened since 1803, became the war room. On the second afternoon, Lady Margaret laid a plan of the Ashdown Great Hall on the long table, weighted its corners with a brass paperweight, a candlestick, a chipped Ming bowl, and her own hairbrush, and looked up at Eleanor with the bright, merciless attention of a field marshal. "Right," said Lady Margaret. "The Hawthorne Ball. 40 families. Uncle Roland will stand approximately here." She tapped a spot near the orchestra. "Because he always does. Because he is an imbecile who believes that being near music makes him interesting. We have 3 openings. 1, we expose him quietly over port after the ball. 2, we expose him loudly on the floor during the ball. 3, we let him expose himself. I have strong opinions on all 3. Simon has one opinion, and it is boring. Eleanor, what do you think?" Eleanor, who had not been called Eleanor aloud more than 4 times in 7 years, and was finding it dangerously easy to answer to, set down her teacup. 4, she said. 4. 4. We let him expose himself, and we are standing there when he does, and we have a magistrate in the adjoining room. Lady Margaret put both hands flat on the mat. "I adore her," she said to Simon without looking at him. "Where did you get her? I want another." "I did not get her," said the Duke. He was standing by the window, his back to them, looking out at the orchard. He had been looking out at the orchard for perhaps 6 minutes, and Eleanor had counted every one. "She got us." "Same difference," said Lady Margaret. "Eleanor, tell me about option 4. A magistrate arrives at the ball as a guest. He is, in fact, there to investigate grain theft in the neighbouring village, and he has been persuaded to come up to the house the morning after for a quiet interview. But he is present at the ball. He sees your uncle. He hears, if we do this correctly, the specific words your uncle will need to say." "Which are?" "The words he used in my father's court-martial transcript. Your brother has read them. I have read them. We know how he thinks. He is vain. He is proud of what he did. He has told the story before, in the wrong company, after too much wine. He is, in the way of small men who have gotten away with one great crime, addicted to the taste of nearly being caught. If he is given an opening in front of the right audience, he will brag." "How?" said Lady Margaret. "Do we give him the opening?" Eleanor permitted herself, for the first time, a real smile. "With me." Simon Ashdown turned from the window. "Absolutely not," he said. "Your Grace, no." "You engaged me," said Eleanor very politely, "to look your uncle in the face and not flinch. I propose to do that. I propose to do it at a ball, in full view of 40 families and a magistrate, while wearing—" her voice wavered for a half-second and then steadied— "whatever it is gentlewomen wear to balls, because I have not attended one in 7 years, and while I can still walk through a room without embarrassing anyone, I have forgotten the rest." "No," said the Duke again. "Simon," said his sister. "He recognized her father," said the Duke tightly. "He will recognize her. She has his bones, she has his hair, she has, God help her, his laugh. I have heard it twice now, and it is exactly Thomas Hart's. If she walks up to Sir Roland and speaks to him, he will know, and he will bolt. We lose him, we lose everything." "Which is precisely," said Eleanor, "why we want him to know. He will not bolt, he will brag. He has never been able to resist a captive audience, and I, forgive me, Your Grace, will be the most captive audience he has ever had. He destroyed my father. He has waited 7 years for someone to come to him about it. He will not be able to help himself. He will tell me, because he has wanted to tell someone, and I will be the only person in his life who deserves to know." The Duke looked at her for a long moment. "You are not a witness," he said quietly. "You are a trap." "I am both." "You are extraordinary," said Lady Margaret, with the air of a woman making a scientific observation. "Simon, say yes." "Meg." "Say yes, or I shall say it for you. And then I shall go upstairs and begin altering my amber silk gown so that it fits her. Because we have 6 days, and a seamstress from the village cannot do miracles. The amber, I think, with her hair. Do you agree, Eleanor? The amber?" "My lady, I do not." "The amber," said Lady Margaret firmly. "Simon?" The Duke of Ashdown looked at Eleanor hard, for what she felt, without being able to defend the impression, was longer than he had intended. Then he bowed, very slightly, not to his sister, but to her. "Miss Hart," he said, "you will forgive me. I have spent so long trying to give you justice that I had forgotten to ask what you would do with it once it was in your hand." "Your Grace," said Eleanor, "I have had 7 years to think about that." "Then I defer to your plan." "Thank you." "But," said the Duke, "on 2 conditions." "Please." 1. You do not attend the ball as Eleanor Vance the maid. You attend as Miss Hart. The staff will be told you are a guest. I will not have you standing in a scullery 1 hour and a ballroom the next. It is beneath you, and it is dangerous. "Agreed." 2. I stand at your elbow the entire evening. If he moves toward you with anything other than champagne and stupidity, I am there. Eleanor felt, under her ribs, a bright, small warmth she was unprepared for. "Your Grace," she said carefully, "I have managed 7 years without your elbow." "You have," said the Duke. "I am offering it anyway." The dress, when Lady Margaret produced it on the 5th evening, was the colour of amber held up to a fire. Not yellow, not gold. Something warmer and deeper than either, shot through with threads that caught the candlelight and threw it back changed. Eleanor stood on a wooden stool in Lady Margaret's dressing room, while 2 maids pinned the hem, and Lady Margaret circled her like a general reviewing troops. "Stand still. Do not breathe. Do not cry. Your mother's face, I take it. How did you—" "Everyone cries the first time they wear amber. It is the light. Your mother is gone. Your father is gone. Your prospects were gone a week ago. And now you are standing in a dressing room in a silk gown, while my brother paces the corridor outside pretending he is not counting the minutes until you come out. Of course you are going to cry. I should like you to do it before Tuesday, please, not during the ball." "My lady, Meg. We are past my lady. Also, the dress is yours to keep. Do not argue. It was made for me 4 years ago, and it has never fitted me properly. It requires your collarbones." "I cannot accept—" "Eleanor," said Lady Margaret, and her voice went, briefly, serious. "The amount of expensive clothing in this house could outfit a small country. My brother has been buying it for the sister he lost, and is terrified of losing again. Let me give you 1 dress. It will do us both good." Eleanor was silent. "The sister he lost," she said, very carefully. Lady Margaret regarded her in the glass. "Our younger sister, Sophia," she said, "who was 14 when our uncle engineered our family's ruin. She did not survive the winter that followed. Simon was 19. He had been told he would inherit a dukedom, and what he inherited was a debt. A mother who would not speak, a sister with a fever nobody could afford to treat, and me being 16 and insufferable. He has never forgiven himself for Sophia. He will never, in fact, forgive himself for Sophia. He has spent the last 8 years learning how to be a duke around that unforgiveness. I tell you this because you are going to meet a man at the ball who did this to us, and I want you to understand that when my brother says he is standing at your elbow, he is not being gallant. He is being specific." Eleanor looked at her reflection. The amber glowed against her pale gold hair. Her eyes, which she had not permitted to be vulnerable in 7 years, were bright with something she did not, quite yet, have a name for. "Meg," she said, "your brother is a better man than his portraits suggest." "His portraits," said Lady Margaret, "are terrible. The last painter made him look like a bank manager. He burned it. It was one of the most satisfying afternoons of my life. Turn left, Eleanor. No, slower. There." Eleanor turned. In the long mirror, a woman she had not seen in 7 years looked back at her. Older, leaner, a jaw that had learned to set itself against grief. Pale gold hair swept up in a twist that exposed her neck. The amber silk pooled around her ankles and caught the candlelight like a slow, fierce signal. She looked, she realized, like her father's daughter at last. Lady Margaret, watching her face in the glass, said nothing for a long moment. "Simon," she called, very quietly, without turning. "Come here." "Meg, I am not—" "Come here." Footsteps in the corridor, then the door, opening only a fraction, then silence. Eleanor did not turn. She watched, in the glass, the Duke of Ashdown's face as he stopped in the doorway and forgot, very briefly, to be the Duke at all. He looked, for one unguarded second, like a man who had walked into a room expecting a problem and found a person. Then the shutter came down again. He bowed. "Miss Hart," he said, with the faint, formal warmth of a man who had, this time, chosen every word. "Your Grace." "The amber suits you." "Your sister insists upon it." "My sister," said the Duke, "is occasionally correct." Lady Margaret, behind them both, made a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a snort. "I am," she said, "regularly correct, and my correctness is about to save this family. Simon, out. Eleanor, breathe. We have 7 days. I expect you to learn a quadrille and to pretend you have not been scrubbing this house's floors. Do you dance?" "I used to." "You still do," said Lady Margaret. "You have simply forgotten you do. Simon will remind you, tomorrow, in the long gallery, after breakfast." "Meg, Simon, you will dance with her. You will dance with her badly if you must, because I recall that you have not been in a ballroom since Sophia left us. But you will dance with her. This is non-negotiable. She needs to remember her feet. You need to remember yours. The ball is in 7 days. I am not going to watch you both walk into it with all the grace of invading geese. Out." The Duke, with a faint expression that might almost have been relief that his sister was running the household, withdrew. Lady Margaret turned back to Eleanor and smiled, and the smile had teeth in it. "He has not danced," she said, "in 9 years. Be gentle with him, Eleanor. He will not be gentle with himself." The long gallery at Ashdown Hall ran the full length of the south wing. Its floor was oak, its walls were portraits, its windows threw bars of morning light across the boards like chalk lines for a measured game. Eleanor stood at its centre the next morning, in a walking dress Lady Margaret had produced from somewhere, and which fitted her almost too well, and she watched the Duke of Ashdown cross the gallery toward her, and she understood for the first time exactly how much trouble she was in. "Miss Hart." "Your Grace." "My sister," he said, "has given instructions." "She has." "She has given them to me twice, once as a request, once as a threat." "She has given them to me in a dressing room," said Eleanor, "while wielding a hairbrush." "That is worse." "I am aware." The Duke smiled. It was a small smile, and it went no further than one corner of his mouth, but it was an entirely different thing from the measured courtesy of the first morning. Something in Eleanor answered it without her permission. "Miss Hart," he said, "would you do me the honour of a quadrille?" "There is no music, Your Grace." "Then we shall hum." He held out his hand. Eleanor placed her own into it. His fingers were warm, warmer than she had braced for. The skin at the base of his thumb was roughened. He rode then, or rode, or both. She had wondered. She had not allowed herself to ask. 4 steps, said the Duke. Then turn, then 4 more, then cross. Keep your eyes up. You are a guest at a ball, not a governess counting heads. You are allowed to look at your partner. I'm out of practice at looking at partners, Your Grace. So am I. He hummed the first bar of the quadrille. His voice was low and, to her surprise, tuneful. They began. For 4 steps, Eleanor was certain she would step on his foot. And for the next 4, she was certain he would step on hers. And after 8 steps, her body, which apparently remembered a great deal more than her mind did, took over, and she was dancing. The Duke led with a precision she had known he would have, and a lightness she had not expected. He did not push. He did not hold her too close. He did not, as a practiced rake would have done, move his hand on her waist. His palm stayed exactly where it had been placed, warm and still, as if he were carrying a candle he did not wish to gutter. You dance well, Your Grace, she said, somewhere around the 16th step. I danced well, he said, in 1817. 9 years. My sister tells you everything. She tells me everything that reflects poorly on you. I believe it is a family sport. It is, said the Duke gravely. The oldest sport we have. Older than the dukedom. Older, certainly, than the house. Turn now, your right shoulder. Yes, there. They turned. The morning sun, falling through the gallery windows, caught her hair and his at the same angle. 2 pale gold heads, seen from above, revolving in a dance neither of them was supposed to be equal to any longer. A housemaid passing the doorway with an armful of linens stopped, saw them, and backed silently away. Your Grace, Eleanor said, low. May I ask you something impertinent? You may ask me anything, Miss Hart. I shall answer what I choose. Your sister, Sophia. The Duke's hand did not tighten on hers. It did not, in fact, move at all, but his humming stopped. What of her? He said. I did not know. When I came here, I thought your family... I was told your family was whole. I came here to bring a grief into your house. I find instead that there is already grief here. I would like not to add to it. They were still dancing. 4 more steps, a turn. You are not adding to it, said the Duke quietly. My uncle added to it. He added to my sister, and he added to your father, and he has been adding to other people I do not yet know about for 15 years. You are... I am trying to find the right verb, Miss Hart, and the honest one is that you are redeeming it, the grief, if that is what this is. I was not certain until this morning. Your Grace. Simon. She missed a step. She recovered. Simon, she said. Thank you. They finished the set in silence. At the last turn, when she should have stepped back and curtsied, he held her hand a fraction of a second longer than the dance required, and then let it go. The morning is warming, he said, in exactly the same voice as before. Shall we walk? Meg will approve. She approves, generally, of anything that keeps me out of the locked library. The locked library that is no longer locked. Touché, Miss Hart. They walked. Beyond the French doors of the gallery, the gardens of Ashdown stretched down to a small ornamental lake, half silvered with spring light. The hedges had begun to green. A line of hawthorn by the lake wall was in its earliest bud, tight and pale, waiting for the day warm enough to burst. The air smelled of turned earth and the faint, warm grass of a sun-warmed lawn. Under Eleanor's slippers, the gravel crunched in small, bright, dry bites. A rook called from somewhere beyond the orchard wall. The lake surface, when they came abreast of it, carried a slow-moving skin of light, rippled where a small wind brushed against it. A gardener, with an old coat and a spade, lifted his hat as they passed. His hands were earth-dark. His boots were clay-caked. Somewhere a cuckoo called, once, twice, without conviction. "Tell me about your father," said the Duke quietly, after they had walked a minute in silence. "Not the transcript. The man." Eleanor walked a few more steps. She was aware, with a clarity she did not entirely enjoy, that nobody in 7 years had asked her this. Her solicitor asked after her documents, her cousins asked after her prospects, landladies asked after her rent. Nobody had asked her about her father. "He was," she said slowly, "the funniest man I have ever known. My mother said he laughed himself awake in the mornings. He used to hide small coins in the books he loved. When you opened them, years later, a sixpence would fall out. He said it was so that I would always remember which books had been worth reading. He was terrible with money. He was kind in a way that annoyed his fellow officers, because he was kind to the wrong people. Stable hands, farriers, widows. He remembered everyone's names. He loved my mother very badly and very well. He had an absurd pride in his uniform, which he could not afford to keep in good repair. And he was innocent. He did not steal from the regiment, I know this. I was 19. I saw his face when they told him what he was accused of. You cannot fake that, you're... Simon. You cannot." "No," said the Duke. "You cannot." "Your uncle took my father's life," said Eleanor, very carefully, "and then he took my mother's, because she followed him 4 months after the verdict, and then he took mine, because I have not lived since. I have prepared. That is not the same." The Duke stopped walking. Eleanor stopped with him. He did not look at her. He looked out across the lake, where the hawthorn was not yet in flower, and his face in profile was as still as the stone wall behind him. "I will give him to you, Eleanor," he said. "Simon, I will give him to you on a plate at the hawthorn ball, and you will take what you need. And then I should like, if you permit, to learn your actual laugh, because I have only heard you laugh once, and it was in my locked library, and I have been thinking about it rather more than is useful." Eleanor did not trust her voice. She did not trust her hand either. She folded them both behind her back, and for a long moment, the two of them stood in the spring sun on the edge of the lawn, and she considered the precise, terrifying shape of what she had just been told. "Simon," she said at last. "Yes." "I believe we should continue walking." "Yes," said the Duke. They continued walking. At the end of the lake path, where the hedge turned toward the orchard, Eleanor did something she would, much later, try and fail to explain to her own children. She stopped. She turned. She took the Duke's face between both her hands, calloused Maid's hands, hands that had scrubbed a floor that morning, and she looked at him, very carefully, for exactly 3 seconds. Then she let him go. "There," she said, "Miss Hart." "I needed," said Eleanor, "to be certain of something. I am. Thank you, Your Grace. Shall we go in for lunch?" And the Duke of Ashdown, 27 years old, pale gold, catastrophically undefended, followed her back to the house, like a man who had, that morning, lost approximately 6 skirmishes, and did not, in fact, mind. The house, in the week that followed, reorganized itself around the ball, with the quiet efficiency of an army preparing a siege. The ballroom doors, locked since Sophia's last winter, were unsealed. 2 footmen worked an entire morning on the hinges with oil and wire brushes until they swung again without their former groan. Chandeliers were lowered on their ropes, the candle cups scraped clean of 8 years of dust, the crystal pendants cleaned with vinegar and soft cloth, until the afternoon sun broke them into rainbows across the polished oak floor. Carpets were taken into the orchard and beaten. Curtains came down for laundering and came up again smelling faintly of lemon. Silver that had not seen a guest in nearly a decade was retrieved from its felt-lined chests and polished to the particular mirror shine that only a young woman with an apron and a grudge can produce. Eleanor worked through most of it. She no longer minded the work. Her hands had learned, in 10 days, that they preferred to be occupied. They had always preferred it, in fact. She was only now permitted to remember. She polished the silver. She helped the parlour maids reset the long dining table for the 32 covers required on the evening of the ball itself. She carried, with a groom named Harry who was shy of her accent, 4 enormous copper pans down from the top-floor cupboard and into the kitchen yard for scouring. She stitched, in an odd hour, the loose lace on a pair of gloves belonging to an aunt of Meg's who would be arriving the day before the ball, and who would, Meg had confided, notice immediately if the lace was not exactly as she remembered. The Duke, through all of this, kept a perfectly correct distance. He passed her in corridors. He inclined his head. He addressed her, on the one occasion when a rolled carpet required a third pair of hands, as Miss Vance, and she curtsied, and they carried the carpet together into the ballroom, in a silence that was neither embarrassed nor strained. He did not, as a lesser man might have done, seek out private moments. He did not write her notes. He did not linger. He simply existed, in the same house as she did, visibly and entirely conscious of her, and, she realized by the 4th day, equally conscious of the fact that an audience of 28 servants was watching him watch her, and that any false move now would cost the servants their discretion later. So he made no false moves. Eleanor, who had spent 7 years waiting to be watched by one person in the world, found the experience unexpectedly steadying. She slept. She ate. She gained, according to a weight cloth Mrs. Hallowell used for evaluating new maids, 2 pounds. She laughed at a joke of Mrs. Pye's on the Wednesday, and did not immediately regret the sound. The amber silk, hanging in its wardrobe in Meg's dressing room, acquired over the week the strange domestic gravity of a decision already made. Eleanor walked past it twice a day. She did not, she noticed, need to look at it. On the evening of the 8th day, Sir Rowland Ashdown arrived at his nephew's house. Eleanor heard the carriage from the east stairwell. She was carrying a basket of linens that she did not need to carry, but that Mrs. Halliwell believed she needed to carry, and the theatre of their ongoing disagreement had required her to carry it up 4 flights. She set the basket down. She crossed to the landing window. She looked. The uncle was smaller than she had imagined. That was her first thought. She had been carrying his image in her mind for 7 years, and she had allowed him to grow, in her imagination, into the size of a storm. He was, in fact, a medium-sized, compact man of 60, with a good coat, a quick walk, and the particular set of the shoulders of a person accustomed to being listened to. His hair was the grey of pewter. His face, even at this distance, had the confident, alert ugliness of a man who had never once, in his life, been told to sit down. She watched him hand his hat to a footman. She watched him clap her Duke, the Duke, on the shoulder. She watched Simon Ashdown smile, politely, and take 1 half-step back out of the touch. Eleanor set her forehead, briefly, against the cool glass of the window. 11 days, she said softly, to herself, to her father, to nobody. Then she picked up the basket of linens, and she carried it on up to the airing room, and she folded sheets for 20 minutes, because in 8 days she had learned, among a number of other things she had not known about herself, that her hands shook less when they were busy. Mrs. Hallowell came in at the end of the 20 minutes. She had the look of a woman who had been saving a speech for 3 days and was about to deliver it. "Miss Vance," she said. "Mrs. Halliwell." "I do not know what you are," said the housekeeper, "and I do not, frankly, wish to know. But I have served this house for 31 years, and I know when His Grace is happy, and when he is in love, and when he is in mourning. He has been in mourning for 9 of those years. He has, for the past week, not been. Whatever you are, Miss Vance, I should ask you, kindly and only once, not to break him. He cannot afford it." Eleanor set down the sheet she was folding. "Mrs. Halliwell," she said, I do not intend to break him. I intend, if he permits it, to stand next to him while he breaks his own uncle. After that, with his permission, I intend to stay." The housekeeper looked at her for a long moment. Then, with the faintest possible softening of her red, square face, she nodded. "And the silk for the ball, I'm told," she said. "Yes." "You'll do," said Mrs. Halliwell, and walked out. The Hawthorne ball opened at 9. Eleanor dressed in Lady Margaret's rooms. Meg had banished the house's usual dresser and taken the work herself, which meant the dressing was conducted with a speed that resembled a cavalry drill. The amber silk slid over Eleanor's chemise, cool and then warming against her skin. The stays laced tight enough to straighten her spine, loose enough to let her breathe. Meg braided the pale gold hair in 2 twists and pinned them at the crown of her head with pins warm from the pin tray. A single drop of orange flower perfume at each wrist. No earrings. Meg had been decided about that, saying the collarbones were doing enough work already. "Tip your chin," said Meg. "No, less. You are not about to behead someone. Yet." "Meg." "Kidding. Mostly. Stand up." Eleanor stood. She caught her reflection in the cheval glass, candlelight catching the amber, pale gold crown of hair, eyes steadier than she had expected, and she felt the faintest, cold tremor at the base of her spine. Meg saw it. Meg said nothing. Meg simply pressed one warm, dry hand flat between Eleanor's shoulder blades, held it there a moment, and let go. "Go," she said. "He is pacing. He has been pacing for 11 minutes. I could hear him from the stairs." By 9:30, the great hall of Ashdown was full. 40 families, 180 guests, an orchestra of 12 that had been hired from Canterbury and was, Lady Margaret had assured Eleanor, only moderately in their cups. The chandeliers were lit. The candle wax sweetened the warm air. The wax-polished oak floor caught the chandelier light in long, rippling gold veins. The spring air came through the open garden doors, warm and smelling of hawthorn, which had, obligingly, bloomed the day before in white drifts that made the whole terrace look as if it had been snowed on in reverse. Somewhere in the crush of silks, a fan clicked open. Somewhere else, a glass rang against a glass. Eleanor stood at the top of the staircase and, for one black second, considered turning around and walking back down into the servants' corridor and out the kitchen door. She did not. She had not come this far to walk out. She took the first step down. The conversation in the hall did not stop. It never does. A ballroom is too well trained for that. But there were pauses. There were heads turning. There were fans lifting to half-cover mouths. Lady Margaret, at the bottom of the stairs in peacock silk, looked up at her and smiled with the smile of a woman watching a long, patient plan come beautifully to boil. The Duke of Ashdown, beside his sister, looked up and did not smile. He did not move. He looked at Eleanor Hart in amber silk on the 5th step from the top, and for a second, his face was exactly what it had been in the dressing-room mirror. The face of a man who had expected a problem, and had been given, instead, a person. Then he stepped forward, and he held out his arm. Eleanor reached the bottom of the staircase. She placed her gloved hand into the crook of his sleeve. "You are here," he said, low. "I am. I had a private wager with myself that you would bolt." "You would have lost." "Yes," said the Duke. "I would have lost." Across the hall, near the orchestra, Sir Rowland Ashdown was laughing at something a viscount had said. He was holding a glass of champagne. He had not, yet, seen her. "Simon," said Eleanor. "Yes?" "I should like a glass of that," she said. "And I should like you to introduce me to your uncle." The Duke looked at her. In the candlelight, his eyes were almost grey gold, warmed by the chandeliers, and she saw in them, for one unguarded instant, something she had only glimpsed before. Not hunger, not possession, just a steady, unfrightening, inconvenient, and entirely mutual understanding. "Miss Hart," he said, very gravely. "May I have the honor?" "You may, Your Grace." They crossed the floor. Sir Roland Ashdown turned, still laughing, and the laugh stopped on his face halfway through. He did not quite go pale, but his eyes caught on Eleanor's hair, and then on her jaw, and then on her hands, and Eleanor watched the recognition happen in 3 separate stages across her father's murderer's face. And she did not flinch. "Uncle," said the Duke of Ashdown, in a voice audible for 10 feet in every direction, "may I present Miss Eleanor Hart? She is the daughter of Captain Thomas Hart, of the 14th Light Dragoons. She is my guest at Ashdown this season." Sir Roland bowed. It was a creditable bow. Only Eleanor, who had been studying him for 7 years in other people's descriptions, saw the faint tremor in the elbow. "Miss Hart," he said. "Captain Hart. Yes, I remember. A most unfortunate case."
"Sir Roland," said Eleanor.
"An unfortunate case, yes. That is, I believe, the phrase that was used." A silence. The Viscount, to whom Sir Roland had been telling his story, cleared his throat and drifted politely out of earshot. Lady Margaret, from the edge of Eleanor's vision, moved. The magistrate, who had been presented to the company earlier in the evening as a gentleman agriculturist named Mr. Adair, turned casually from the orchestra and, with the air of a man looking for the supper room, found himself standing 5 feet from Sir Roland's left shoulder. Sir Roland did not notice. He had, in fact, begun to smile. "Miss Hart," he said, and now his voice dropped a quarter octave into something warmer, more conspiratorial, more— the word Eleanor had been waiting 7 years to hear— indulgent. "I will confess, my dear, I did not expect to see a heart at an Ashdown ball. You are, forgive an old man, the very image of your father. It is quite striking."
"You knew him well, Sir Roland?"
"Oh, we served together, briefly, a very long time ago."
"You testified against him, I believe, at his court-martial."
Sir Roland's smile faltered. It recovered. It resettled at a slightly different angle. "A difficult duty," he said. "Yes," said Eleanor. "A difficult duty. Tell me about that, if you would. I've been trying for 7 years to understand what a man thinks while he is performing that particular difficult duty." "Miss Hart, I am not armed, Sir Roland. I do not carry a weapon. I am merely curious. My father was a convivial man. He trusted the people he served with. He was not, in my memory, a man who stole. You told a court of officers that he did. I should like to know, not for the record, not for the magistrate, not for anything that will leave this ballroom. I should simply like to know, Sir Roland, how it felt when you said the words." Sir Roland looked at her. A thing happened in his face that Eleanor would spend the rest of her life trying to name. It was not shame. It was not guilt. It was a kind of dreadful, delayed pleasure. The pleasure of a man who had been keeping a secret so long he'd begun to resent the silence, and who had just been offered, by a pale gold young woman in amber silk at his own nephew's ball, the first chance in 7 years to tell it. His chin lifted. His eyes narrowed. He took a long sip of his champagne, and then, quite calmly, with the weary, amused air of a man confiding to an intimate in the last warm hour of a dinner party, Sir Roland Ashdown said, "My dear, your father was a good man, and a fool. He signed the receipts I put in front of him without reading them. Men like your father always do. I had needed the regimental fund for a private matter of honor. I returned the money in the end. I am not a thief, Miss Hart. But the receipts by then had become inconvenient. It was a question of which officer would hang. He was the more expendable. I was not. It is a regrettable arithmetic, but it is arithmetic. I am very sorry. Most days. He smiled at her. You have his laugh, if I recall correctly. Do you have his laugh? Eleanor looked at him. She did not cry. She did not slap him. She did not, although her body begged to, reach up and take him by the throat. She simply looked at him, pale gold, straight-backed, 26 years old, carrying her lost father's laugh in her chest like a spoon held level with water. And she said, I have his laugh, Sir Roland. I am not, at this moment, going to share it with you. 5 feet away, the gentleman agriculturist, Mr. Adair, closed the notebook he had been holding inside his coat. He cleared his throat. Sir Roland Ashdown, he said. A word. Sir Roland turned, saw the magistrate, registered, slowly, what he had done. The champagne glass paused halfway to his lips. His face, which had been, the moment before, almost at ease, crumpled at the jaw, like paper when a fist closes. He turned back to Eleanor with the wild look of a man who had just heard the mechanism on a rifle he had not known was loaded. You, he began. Uncle, said the Duke of Ashdown, and his voice was very quiet and very clear, and it carried. This is Mr. Adair. He is a magistrate. He has a number of questions for you. I suggest you answer them honestly. You will find that honesty, at this particular juncture, is the least expensive option still available to you. Sir Roland stared at his nephew. Simon! Uncle, said the Duke gently. You took my father's younger brother's regiment from him in 1803. You took my father's health in 1810. You took my sister in 1821, when you called in our debts at the worst possible month. And you took Miss Hart's father in 1819. I have been waiting a long time to say this to you in a public room. You are not welcome at Ashdown Hall. Leave my house. The orchestra, by some instinct orchestras have, played 2 extra bars of the same measure before it noticed it should not have. Sir Roland Ashdown set down his champagne. He looked at Eleanor. You did this, he said thickly. No, Sir Roland, said Eleanor quietly. You did this. 7 years ago. I simply waited. Mr. Adair, magistrate, took Sir Roland by the elbow with the patient, practiced grip of a man who had been doing this particular work for 30 years, and escorted him, without ceremony and without drama, out of the ballroom, out through the terrace doors, and into the spring night. The hawthorn blossoms on the terrace flagstones crushed, very softly, under his boots. Eleanor watched him go. She did not, for a long moment, breathe. Beside her, the Duke of Ashdown said, Miss Hart, I am going to ask you to do one difficult thing. Yes? Do not collapse until we reach the library. The ballroom is watching us. We are going to dance 1 quadrille, looking as if nothing has happened. And then, I am going to walk you out of this room like a man escorting a lady to supper, and you are going to hold until that door closes. After that, Eleanor, you may do exactly as you please. Simon? The quadrille, if you can. She nodded once. She took his hand. They danced. Eleanor could not, afterwards, remember the music. In the library, the public one, the war room one, not the one with 3 locks, at approximately 11 o'clock, the Duke of Ashdown closed the door behind them, turned, and was, at last, not a duke. The fire had been built up against the spring evening, and its heat came against her cheek in a slow, unsteady pulse. The room smelled of beeswax polish and warm leather, and the faint, dry scent of old paper. A single tall clock in the corner struck the 1/4 hour with a soft, padded chime. The carpet under her slippers was thick enough to muffle her steps. From the ballroom, far enough to be safe, close enough to be a presence, came the muffled, bright weave of the orchestra playing something in 3/4 time. Eleanor, he said. She did not answer. She did not, for a long moment, do anything. She stood in the center of the faded carpet, amber silk catching the firelight, and she began, very quietly, to cry. She did not sob. She did not make any sound at all. The tears simply came. 7 years of them, running in perfectly straight lines down her cheeks, as if her face had been waiting for permission to have done so since she was 19. Simon Ashdown did not move for 3 seconds. Then he closed the distance between them in 4 strides and gathered her, amber silk and calloused hands and all, against his chest. He did not speak. He did not, for perhaps 2 minutes, do anything at all, except hold her very steadily, one hand flat between her shoulder blades, the other at the nape of her neck, as if he were afraid that if he let go, her head would tip forward and break on the carpet. "I have you," he said eventually, very quietly, into her hair. "I have you. I have you. Simon. I have you, Eleanor. Take as long as you need." She took 7 minutes. When she lifted her head, she found that his waistcoat was entirely ruined, and that his arms were still around her, and that her own hands had, at some point, closed on the lapels of his coat with a grip she could not now quite loosen. She did not immediately try. "Your waistcoat," she said. "It is expendable," said the Duke. "You are not." Eleanor laughed. It was a wet, broken, entirely honest laugh, and he went very still against her for 1 second as he heard it. And she understood, in that second, that he had been telling her the truth about her laugh the whole time. "Simon," she said. "Eleanor," he said, "do not tell me anything important in the next 10 minutes. You have had the worst evening of your life. I've had, in its way, a very good one. The conversation we are about to have, if you still wish to have it in a week, will be a considerably better conversation for both of us if we have it while you are wearing ordinary clothing, and I am not standing in a ruined waistcoat. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Good." "I should like," said Eleanor carefully, "to stay exactly here, however, for another moment." "As long as you wish," said the Duke of Ashdown, and did not, in fact, let go. The fire shifted in the grate. Outside, in the ballroom at the other end of the house, the orchestra played on. A footman, passing the library door with an empty tray, saw them through the half-open gap, turned around, walked the other way, and kept his mouth shut for the rest of his natural life. Eleanor, her forehead against the Duke's shoulder, said softly, "Simon." "Eleanor." "You did say you had lost a wager that I would bolt." "I did." "I am not going to bolt." "No," said the Duke. "I have gathered that." "Good." They stood there a little longer in the firelight. Outside the window, the hawthorn blossoms on the terrace fluttered in a spring wind neither of them heard. Somewhere, upstairs, Lady Margaret had found a bottle of brandy and a willing footman, and was toasting, in the privacy of her dressing room, the specific downfall of an uncle she had loathed since the age of 6. In the locked library, the 3-locked cabinet stood untouched. Its 3rd lock had been opened 2 days earlier. Its contents, letters, ledgers, an old regimental receipt book with Captain Thomas Hart's signature above a column of figures he had never read, had been arranged, after Eleanor had seen them, into a clean pile on top of the cabinet. Tomorrow, Simon Ashdown would take that pile to the magistrate. Tonight, in a public library with a ruined waistcoat and a woman in amber silk clinging to him as if to a mast, he had other business. "Eleanor Hart," he said. "Simon Ashdown. I would like, when you are ready, to court you." She was quiet a moment. "Your Grace," she said finally, against his coat, "you have been courting me, with respect, since the morning of my first day." "Yes," said the Duke. "I was afraid you had noticed." "I noticed." "And?" Eleanor lifted her head. Her eyes were red. Her hair had come loose on one side. Her amber silk was creased at the waist where his hand had been. She looked, he thought with a kind of slow wonder, more like her father's daughter than she had in any of the portraits he had been keeping in the locked room for 5 years. "I accept," she said. They were married in the autumn. Between the spring ball and the autumn wedding stretched 6 months that Eleanor would afterwards find difficult to account for in any exact way, because she had spent the last 7 years of her life living on an internal clock calibrated to dread, and she had to build a new one. It took longer than she expected. A year earlier, she had woken every morning in a boarding house room off the Strand, with the same cold sediment at the bottom of her thoughts. Her father, the regiment, the chest of papers, Sir Rowland's face. Now she woke in a guest room at Ashdown that Meg had refused to let her call anything other than her room, and for the first 4 weeks she woke at 5 every morning and lay in the dark listening for the sound of a bell or a footstep or anything at all that would justify her still being there. The house provided nothing of the kind. The house, in May, was quiet and warm and smelled in the mornings of baking bread and the particular cool mineral air that comes off a lake at dawn. By the 5th week, she slept until 7. By the 6th, she had, without quite deciding to, begun to take her morning tea on the terrace instead of in her room. By the 8th week, she was found by a footman on a warm Thursday, asleep in the hammock under the orchard wall, with a copy of a very dull parliamentary treatise open across her chest, and she was, he later told Mrs. Halliwell in a tone of awe, snoring. Simon, through all of this, kept an extraordinarily careful pace. He did not press her. He did not court her in the theatrical sense at all. He simply, methodically, made himself available for the precise activities she discovered she wanted. He rode with her in the mornings when she asked. He went into the village on her errand without comment. He introduced her to the steward and waited quietly in the back of the room while she asked, in a voice she was still teaching to carry, the questions she needed to ask about the tenants, the rents, the hawthorn hedges, the school on the North Farm that he had wanted to rebuild for 2 years. He turned over, without remark, the running of the East Garden to her and the seamstress in the village whose daughter had been asking for work. He took her to his bankers on a grey afternoon in June and signed a paper that settled upon her, outright and irrevocably, and in her own name, a sum that was roughly twice the value of the estate her father had once lost. When she tried to object, he said, very quietly, that the money had been waiting for someone for a great many years, and would she please allow it to find its person? She did not object again. They were married on a warm, overcast Saturday in the parish church at Ashdown Village, with the leaves just turning in the churchyard oak, and the air smelling of wood smoke and apples from the press at the inn next door. The ceremony took 7 minutes. Meg cried exactly twice, once when Eleanor walked down the aisle, and once when Simon, at the wrong moment in the vows, reached up and gently thumbed a tear off Eleanor's cheek before she had noticed it was there. The registrar, a practical man from Kent, later observed to his wife that he had married a great many couples in his career, and had never, in 30 years, seen 2 people hold each other's hand throughout the ceremony quite so steadily. Like they had been practicing, he said. His wife said, perhaps they had. The whole thing had been made possible by a summer of negotiations conducted largely by Lady Margaret, who had, the morning after the Hawthorn ball, appointed herself the principal architect of the rest of Eleanor Hart's life, on the grounds that nobody else in the household could be trusted with it. So Rowland Ashdown's trial was completed by August. He was convicted of fraud, forgery, and perjury. He avoided the gallows, but not the transportation. He was gone, 2 years later, in New South Wales, of a gastric complaint that his prison physician noted, with some professional detachment, could have been prevented by a little less rage. Captain Thomas Hart's name was cleared by parliamentary notice in September. The back pay owed to his widow, now long gone, was, at Eleanor's request, settled upon a fund for the daughters of officers who had been lost in prison. The fund grew. It grew very considerably. It continues, at the time of this telling, to grow. The Duke of Ashdown kept the locked library. He did not lock it any longer. Its door, once avoided by every maid in the house on pain of dismissal, stood open most mornings, because Eleanor liked to work there, in the mornings, at the desk with the 3 oil lamps and the worn carpet, and Simon liked, more than he had expected to like anything in his life, to find her there. On the first anniversary of their wedding, in the autumn, she opened a book he had given her, a battered Cooper that had been her father's, and a 6pence fell out of it into her lap. She looked up. Simon was watching her from the doorway. "I had to ask a great many people," he said, "how your father used to do it. Your cousin Mary was extraordinarily helpful." Eleanor closed her hand around the 6pence. "Simon Ashdown," she said. "Eleanor Ashdown. You are a ridiculous man." "I am aware." She crossed the room, and she kissed him in the doorway of the library that had once been locked against her. And beyond the French windows, the hawthorn was gone brown with autumn, and the long case clock down the hall struck 8, the same hour at which, 1 year before, she had turned a key in a door she was not supposed to have, and walked into the rest of her life. If you have ever opened a door you were warned about, the door in a house where you did not quite belong, the door that everyone else was too well trained to touch, and if you have ever stepped through it and found on the other side not the monster you braced for, but the person you had been looking for without permission to know it, tell me, in the comments, what you found. I read every one. If this story kept you company tonight, subscribe. There is another door waiting next Friday. Sleep well.